Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our GCSE Science revision session this afternoon. Thank you for joining us and for joining me and the other teachers from our science department here at Academy21. You're going to be hearing lots of things from us today, tips and tricks for your exams that are coming up. You're going to be hearing from Lakshmi next, and also we're going to have Jess, Neelam and Leslie behind the scenes answering your questions in the Q&A. Our science teachers here at Academy21 are all former classroom teachers of many years' experience, and also many of them are experienced examiners. And we're here to share our knowledge of how you can maximise your marks in every question. On our team, we've got even some principal examiners, so they've given us some of our tips on how the questions are marked and how to make sure that you get every mark that you can. We're also wanting to try and keep you calm and focused, and we're going to show you the best ways that you can approach the exams in the coming weeks and show your knowledge and hard work to the best of your ability on the day. And hopefully you'll feel really confident doing that after today's session because you know exactly what to expect. So now that everyone's arriving into the room, I just want to go through a few housekeeping things with you. First of all, I really hope you can all hear me well, but please let us know in the little poll over at the side if you're having any issues with that. And of course, if you can't hear me, then please do as it says there. You're going to hopefully put a message in the Q&A. Also, if you find closed captions useful, you can turn them on just up at the top there. If you click the CC button, you'll be able to activate that for yourself so that you can follow what's going on as we go through today. We've also got a few other things in this room that you'll see. First of all, we'll have some other polls as well as this one as we go through the questions and tips. So please do join in with the polls as you see them appear. Also, at the top next to us here, we have a download section where you can download a copy of all of today's slides. You can also download some other things which will draw your attention to as we go through the session today as well. Please do use the Q&A. We've got all these great teachers here who are in the background, and they're going to be helping you, answering your questions in the Q&A as quickly as they can, helping you with questions either about what we're talking about today, questions about the exams and what's coming up. So please do use the Q&A box. You can try it out now if you want. It's just there at the side. So one thing to mention from the downloads box at the top, we have got a revision planner that we put together for Academy21 students, which we're sharing with you today. If you click on the link in the downloads pod that says A21 Science Revision Planner, you can download this interactive guide, which lists and links together helpful information about each of the individual papers, so you know when they are and what's in each of them. Our students have been finding that really useful, so please do take a copy of that by downloading it from the pod today. So I'm now going to hand over for the first part of our session today to Lakshmi, and she is going to lead you through some helpful, useful information about command words that are used in the science exams.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, my name is Lakshmi, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about command words because every exam question has a command word attached to it, which tells you exactly what the examiner is looking for. So as soon as you read an exam question, you can see exactly and think about what they're looking for. So to start off with, we're going to have a look at a few command words for tables and graphs. So these are often very short questions and short answers. So 1 mark, a couple of words, or filling in gaps from tables. So you might be asked to fill in a gap in a diagram, a table, or a sentence. So really quick, snappy answer there. You might also be asked to label a diagram. So make sure when you're labeling a diagram, when you're extending a line from the point that you're labeling, you make sure that it touches both your answer and the object that you're labeling. You might also be asked to measure something, so it's important that you have a ruler ready and on hand so then you can do that accurately. You might also be asked to plot something, so make sure that you have a sharp pencil ready and a rubber handy in case you've made a mistake and you want to go and correct it. And often when you're asked to plot something, it's associated with a graph. So let's have a look at an example question associated with a graph. So you'll notice that you have a graph here, and in exams, they refer to them as figures. So a figure is a diagram, a graph, a table, or a photograph within the question. And the question will refer back to it if it wants you to. So, for example, this question is asking you to complete the figure to show some information. So the figure I automatically know is this graph because it's within the question. And I'm being asked to complete something. So that's how I know, and I've got that idea in my mind before I answer it. But first, let's have a look at how many marks this is worth. How many marks is this question worth, and how do you know? So pop your answers in the Q&A. So how many is it worth, and how do you know? Great. Yeah, I'll just leave that up for a moment or two so you can answer that. Great. So you're correct. It's worth 1 mark. And the reason we know that is because it's a number in brackets following the question. So it's always there. So you know exactly how many points you need to make. So for this, it's just 1 mark. So I just need to draw one thing. So looking back at the question, it's asking me to complete the figure. So I need to draw something in this graph. And I need to show some information. So that information must have been given to me in that question. So I can refer back to the question, and I'm looking back at this question and I can see that there's a number here, 78%. So let's read this question. 78% of people diagnosed with breast cancer in 2001 were alive 10 years later. If I look back on my graph, I can see that what's being plotted is the percentage of people alive 10 years after diagnosis against the types of cancer. So breast, prostate, skin, and testicular. And I can see that each of these types of cancer have 2 bars associated with it, apart from this first one. So I clearly need to pop something there. And so that's what I can do. So I'm going to draw that now. So that's what I've drawn. So I've drawn my bar graph using a ruler and a pencil. Obviously, I've not done this on the screen, but make sure you have a pencil and a ruler handy so that you can do that and then rub it out if you don't quite get it right the first time. So that's really important for you to take to an exam. So now let's look at command words for written questions. So these are often short and snappy command words for you. So if you're asked to define something, it's asking you for the meaning of something. So what's the definition for this? Define photosynthesis, define respiration, define something along those lines. You might also be asked to give something, so you only need a short answer. You don't need to describe, you don't need to explain. So I often, whenever I mark these papers, I see long answers when I didn't need all that information because people start describing, they start explaining, and you've used all that time doing that when really you just needed a short and snappy answer. And that's an example we're going to look at in a moment. Furthermore, you might be asked to name something, so naming a process, naming a cell, naming an organelle, anything like that. So it's a short answer, only a couple of words are needed. And then finally, you might be asked to write something, which is just another way of asking you to define, give, or name something. So don't describe, don't explain, just write one word or a couple of words associated with that question. So let's look at an example of that. So as we can see, we've got another figure here, and it tells me in the question that it shows a cell. Oxygen molecules are shown inside and outside the cell, and it includes a key here, so I know what these little circles are. They're oxygen molecules. And I've been asked to give one way you can tell that the cell in the figure above is not a plant cell. So I've got a number following the questions, which tells me that a short answer is needed. It's worth 1 mark, so I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. 1 word or a couple of words. And that's further cemented by what the actual question says. Give 1 way. So I only need to write 1 thing down. And the question asks me to state why it's not a plant cell. So I need to remember the differences between plant and animal cells. So what I'd like you to do is suggest an answer in the Q&A. So why does this image, why is it a cell that is not a plant cell? How can I tell what's not present there that might be present in a plant cell? Some great answers popping through. Really well done. So I'll just give you another 10 seconds to pop your suggestions down. Really great. So thank you for sharing those answers. I've come up with a few myself. So I've got 3 options here. I'm not necessarily saying that they're all correct, but what I want you to do is tell me which answer do you think is best to answer that question, which is asking for 1 way that it's not a plant cell. So it needs to be correct and answer the question itself. So there should be a poll on the screen there that you can see. So A, B, or C, which do you think it is? Fab. Oh, it's got a bit smaller. There we go. Okay, great. So the correct answer, so really well done, guys, is C, because it's providing 1 answer, so no cell wall, and it's also correct. The first one is not correct because they both, plant and animal cells, both have nuclei, so both have a nucleus. And B, it's just too many options. It's not 1 way. It's too many. You just need 1 thing and it needs to be correct. So that's no cell wall. Really well done. So now let's have a look at command words for much longer answers. So you've got your 3 mark, 4 mark, 5 mark, and 6 mark questions here. So you might be asked to describe something. So it could be that you are given data and you're just asked to describe the trend. So say what you see. That's it. You're describing what you see. That's it. If you're asked to explain something, you have to, well, you've got the description there, but you need to add a bit more to it. So you're saying what you see, but you're also explaining, or you're giving a reason why it's happening. So this is what the data's showing. Why is that? You need to tell me. So it could be that you need to use your information, so your own knowledge, or it could be information from the question itself that has already been given to you. So what and why. You might also be asked to evaluate something, so giving pros and cons, so using your own knowledge or information that's been supplied to you in a graph, a table, a bit of text, anything like that. And you also might be asked to compare. So 2 options, compare them, similarities, differences, and based on the number of marks that are being given, so if it's 4 marks, so 2 points, well, 2 differences and 2 similarities, things like that. So making sure you are looking at how many marks they're worth and using that to answer your question. So let's have a look at an example of an explain question. So here is a muscle cell, another figure, Remember, figure is a diagram, a table, a graph, a picture that appears on your paper. So give one function of muscle cells and then explain how muscle cells are adapted for their function. Use the figure above. So the keywords that I can see here that I might want to underline as well. Function is the job it does. Adapted, so an adaptation is a feature that helps the thing do its job. So here are some potential answers for these two questions. You'll notice that the first question, so the first part of the question, is worth 1 mark, but the second part is worth 2 marks. So that tells me that I need to write a bit more for that second part. For the first part, I could use any of these because they all mean a similar thing. I don't need to write all 4 of them because I'm just wasting my time. And remember, time is quite precious in this scenario. So I can just write that it's for movement. I could say it's to contract, but I don't need to write all 4 options, just one of them. What might I say for the second question or the second part of the question? If I look at the diagram or the figure, there is a part of it that is labelled. So this is labelled. Maybe we can come up with a reason why that's labelled. So explain how muscle cells are adapted for their function. So in the Q&A, give me some reasons and some ideas as to why the mitochondria might be labelled in this muscle cell. So in the Q&A, maybe we could have some suggestions. Some fab answers, really well done. Thank you for contributing your ideas and participating. Yeah, so I'm getting this a lot. So for the first mark, they have many mitochondria. So I can see that there's a reason it's labelled in that diagram. There are lots of these mitochondria. So hopefully you can see my cursor moving about there. So why? So that's my first mark. Let's move on to the second mark. How is having many mitochondria an advantage for this cell? Yeah, good. Yeah, because it releases something super important. Really great. Thank you for those suggestions. Yeah, it's so that they can release a lot of energy there. So really well done. So that would be your second mark for this type of question. And a lot of you mentioned respiration as well for that. So that's also great to see. So now I'm going to pass over to Claire, who's going to go through calculations with you.
Hi, everyone. Some great answers we've seen there coming through with the questions. Lots of revision been going on already, we can see. But what I'm going to lead you through now is a few tips and sort of things to look for when you're tackling the papers that will have most of the calculations in them. So we're going to start off by looking at the front of a paper. Now, I noticed in the Q&A, we've had the same question from a few people, and it's a really good question, asking if this revision session is intended for foundation tier or higher tier students. The answer is it's intended for everyone sitting any level of GCSE chemistry. physics, biology and combined science exams. All of them use the same command words. All of them have the same ways of tackling a question. So this example here that I've got outlined is showing you the front page of a foundation physics paper for combined science. And I just want to pick out a few things because we get these papers and there's so much information in the front. And sometimes you just want to know that you understand what it's telling you and where to look for the things that are going to help you do well in the exam. So the first thing is it says here materials, okay? You must have, for your physics paper, for all your science papers, a ruler. That's really important. There's so many places you're going to need to use your ruler. Also a scientific calculator. And for the physics exam, paper 1 and paper 2, the equation sheet, which we'll look at in a moment. So the ruler is essential for lots of things, for measuring and for straight lines, which are both really important in different parts of science papers. Being able to draw a graph clearly, making sure that you're very accurate in where that you plot lines if you're doing a line of best fit, being able to label a diagram and draw a line or an arrow to the part of the diagram that you're drawing. And also sometimes you will be asked to take measurements. That can be in chemistry, physics or biology. There are measurements that you'll be asked to take off the page with your ruler. So make sure that you have your ruler with you. It is also really important to have a calculator with you in every science exam. An ordinary one is typically fine for most exams, but what I would always recommend that you do is make sure that the calculator that you are revising with right now is the one that you will use on the exam day. Okay, it does say here, you know, if you don't have a calculator, ask your school. You can probably borrow one. But if that's the case, please try to borrow it in advance so that you are familiar with it. Okay, I like to compare this to my classes. It's like if you walk into the exam and borrow someone else's calculator. It's like when you borrow someone else's phone and you try to do something simple, but if it's a different type of phone from the one that you have, everything feels like it's slightly slower and difficult to do. If you want to have your calculator, the one that you use all the time, ready to take with you to every exam, so you are really fast at using it and confident. The thing that you're going to be given in the physics exam, which is really, really helpful, and you want to be using it to its full advantage, is the equation sheet. Now, the equation sheet wasn't originally something that GCSE science students were given. They were asked to learn some of the equations, and some of the equations were given to them within the questions in the paper. After the pandemic, it was decided to provide the equations, and this support has been confirmed to continue. And your teachers will have shared that with you. But just as a reminder, you will have this 2 sides of A4 equation sheet in your exam for physics, paper 1 and paper 2. And it's really important to know that and to use it. Okay, now this is just a really small screenshot. I know you won't be able to read all the equations, but as you can see, there are lots of them. If you're doing only foundation tier, you can ignore the ones labeled HT because those are higher tier only equations. And what you do not need to do is learn any of these by memory, okay? You don't need to waste the brain space memorizing those, because what is important is your ability to identify them and use them and apply them in questions. So just as one example, zooming in on one of these to show you how useful it can be, here's the equation Ohm's law, which we use in electricity and physics. And if you look close up, it shows us the equation written out in words, and it does this for all the equations. So here we've got potential difference is equal to current multiplied by resistance. And also over at the other side in the next column, it shows us the symbols that we use for each of those quantities. I've highlighted this one in particular because some exam boards use the term potential difference and some use voltage, and those terms can be used interchangeably. And it's nice on the equation sheet that we have potential difference marked with its symbol V, and that reminds us that it's voltage measured in volts. It reminds us that current has the symbol I, and we should know that that's measured in amps, and resistance is R. So that's just one example from the physics equation sheet. You will have that in your exam for physics, paper 1 and paper 2 for all boards, for all levels. In the chemistry paper, you get something extra and special as well, which has always been given in chemistry because you do not need to memorize the periodic table. Okay, so the periodic table you should be really familiar with by now, but make sure that you've had a look at the periodic table issued by your exam board. This is the AQA one. They all have exactly the same information on them. They'll just have a different logo at the top on the day. But I like to highlight how much this actually tells you. okay? It is a periodic table, but it's got a key. And the key is the really important part for us here because it shows us the things that we're going to know. So I'm going to zoom in on sodium just now. When you're doing any question in a chemistry paper that involves you writing down symbols, so let's say you've been asked to write a chemical equation or symbols. For this, it's really important to always double check. The reason I've picked sodium is because it's one of the ones that often causes confusion because, of course, sodium, the word sodium starts with an S, but the symbol for sodium is Na. And there is an element that begins with an S. It's sulfur over there. And so often, if you're in a hurry in the exam, even though you knew that sodium was Na, you might just write S in a hurry because S is for sodium. But you don't ever need to do that. Always take the few seconds that it takes to look up the symbols in the periodic table. There's no reason ever to drop marks for symbols because every single one of them is given to you. You just have to scan through and look for the name, and then you can refer to the symbol. So symbols is the first thing I want you to make sure to always refer to in the periodic table. Sodium, the atomic symbol. The other thing that's really helpful is the bottom thing in the key, which is the atomic number. And see how it's got brackets proton in the middle? That's telling you a fact. That is telling you a fact that you might get a mark for. Atomic number equals number of protons. So perhaps you're given a diagram of an atom and asked what its atomic number is. You just count up the number of protons. And you could actually look at the periodic table and remind yourself, which one's atomic number again? It's the number of protons. It says so right there on the table that you are given. You've also got another number on this table, which can be useful in some of the chemistry calculations for calculating masses. And that's called relative atomic mass. That's the bigger number and it's at the top. Make sure to always use the key when looking up any of these because there are two numbers in each square for each element on the periodic table. The big one is the mass number, but you don't actually need to remember that. You just need to look at the key and you'll see mass number is the top number always. So be careful not to get them the wrong way around by using the key. The final thing on the periodic table that can be helpful to you are the group numbers that I've just highlighted in blue. The group numbers show us the columns up and down the way on the periodic table. It doesn't give us the group names. That would be nice, but it does give us the numbers. And the key ones like group number 1, the alkali metals, that reminds you lots of things. Reminds you they've got one outer electron in their outer shell, that they form one bond, that they form one positive ions. So these numbers are really helpful as well. So remember to refer to this table while you're doing your revision for chemistry. And remember that you should have this in every chemistry paper, paper 1 and paper 2. So in this section, I said we're going to be looking at equations and calculations in particular here. So we're going to be looking at how to apply the numerical data that you get in a question and use it in the exam. We've got a technique that we use in our lessons here that we find is a good memory aid for the steps that you should go through when you're doing calculations. So first of all, find the values. Now, you might not have seen it called this fire technique, but you will probably have seen your teachers do this and practiced it yourself. You can highlight or you can circle, but you want to find the values that are given in the question and identify what they are. Okay, if there's a number that says 20 grams, you'll know, right, that's a mass because it's something in grams. Or if it's 10 degrees Celsius, you go, right, that's a temperature because it's in degrees Celsius. So circle the numbers and identify what quantity they refer to. You can then use that to cross-reference with the equation sheet and find an equation that has all the different quantities that you've identified are given to you in the question. Quite often in our exam papers, the formula will be given. Not in all questions, but in some questions, the formula will be given. And in that case, you don't need to go to the equation sheet. But if it's not given, make sure that you go to the equation sheet to get the information from that one. Okay? So the second letter, I. I is insert. Insert values into the correct place, sometimes called substituting the numbers into the equation. So you take the values from the question and you put them into the right place in the equation. Okay, and we're going to do an example of this in a moment. R is for rearrange. Sometimes we will need to rearrange the equation. If the quantity that we're trying to calculate appears on the right-hand side, we want to rearrange it. So that's often the case in a lot of the examples that we'll be given. And then finally, E stands for easy finish. And I'm going to explain and give you an example to show what that means. But in calculations, there are things where it's easy to go wrong, but it's also easy, if you remember to check for an easy finish, double check your units, recheck your answer on the calculator again. It only takes a few seconds, and sometimes it has, been easy to mistype or miss a decimal place. And also, and this is the one that I will mention most often to my students, common check sense your answer. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in our example as well. So let's look at this in the context of an actual past paper question. So this paper here had a diver who was about to dive off of a diving board. Okay, so you've got, again, the figure, as Lakshmi mentioned before. Figures can be a picture, can be a table or a graph. So this figure is showing this image here, and we see the diver just at the top of the board. The question tells us at the instant that the diver hits the water, the kinetic energy of the diver is 5040 joules. So we have a number there. That's one of our numbers that we need to identify. The speed of the diver is 12 meters per second. Could you tell me in the Q&A what quantities you think either of those numbers are? It kind of tells us, but say, what are my quantities here? What are my quantities here? Just have a go in the Q&A if you can as well. Okay, so we've got quantities. We've got two different numbers there, and we know what they are. Okay. Good. Yeah. So those are the numbers, and you would get your highlighter out or your pencil, just circle them or underline them, and that's what we're going to do now. So I've highlighted these here nice and brightly, and I've found the numbers. That was my F, found the numbers. So 5040 is a kinetic energy. We've also got 12 meters per second, and that's speed. Okay, that's the speed that is going to be traveling at when he hits the water. We've gone to the equation sheet and looked up the equation for kinetic energy. And kinetic energy is 0.5 multiplied by mass multiplied by speed squared. So we've written out the equation carefully. We didn't have to remember that. It's right there on the equation sheet. So that was step one, the F. We've then got to insert. Really carefully with this one, because there's brackets, there's a square. We want to be really careful to insert things in the right place. So we insert the 5040 joules, that's energy. We insert that on the left. We've not rearranged yet. We're just inserting all the numbers really carefully as well. We've then got the 0.5. Okay, 0.5 multiplied by the M value, which is the mass of the diver, and then multiplied by 12 squared. So that's insert. Let's rearrange it. Okay, if we rearrange at this stage, we rearrange and we will see it comes into M equals 5040 divided by 72. So I'm like, great, I've got there. Just going to do this calculation in my head. Or I'm going to use my calculator really quickly and I'm going to come up with an answer. Okay, so the answer I came up with was 700. Question in the poll, is that a realistic mass for a person? I've done the calculation and the answer that I got was 700 kilograms. Could you vote in the poll just now? Do you think that answer is realistic? Because I said we do a common sense check. We check our number, we redo it on our calculator. If you've got a calculator, you can check, or you might be doing it in your head. You can also check the units, kilograms. Yes, we're happy with kilograms, but 700, do people weigh 700 kilograms? That's a common sense check. If you get an answer of 700, or maybe you got an answer of 7, you might think that can't be right and need to check it again. So we do our common sense check and we use our calculator to recalculate it. And we find that actually, no, this one was 70 kilograms. Okay, 70 kilograms. And this was a 3-mark question. So even if we had written down 700 kilograms and we'd written all the other steps were correct, you'd still get 2 marks. Okay. But if you just did that easy finish and double checked your answer, you'll make sure that you get the 3rd mark at this stage as well. Now, we're now going to move into looking at some top exam tips with you together. So I'm going to have Lakshmi's going to join us back again. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so we've gone over quite a lot today. So we're going to just now talk about the exams themselves and some top tips towards the end of it. So like Claire said, this is what your paper will look like. So you'll have a centre number present, which your school will tell you. So you don't need to remember it. It's usually on the wall or somewhere, or you can just ask somebody around you, so the invigilators. Your candidate number is usually given to you in your school exam timetable, but if you don't have it, just ask somebody. It's really important that you get that and ask somebody, rather than just sitting there worrying about it. Yeah, just make sure you ask somebody about that. Also, this capital letter in bold will either be an F or an H, and the F stands for foundation, the H higher. So make sure that you're sitting in front of the correct tier. So ask for the correct one. And just looking at these instructions on the front page, you're gonna need to have a black ink pen, and that's because it gets scanned in, and it's really important that all your answers get scanned in because it gets sent off to different people to mark. So make sure that you're using a black ink pen. You also need to use pencil when you're drawing something, and because you'll have a pencil, it's important that you have a rubber, so in case you make a mistake that you want to go over, it's important that you take both pencil and rubber to your exam. Like I've just said, you need to fill in those boxes at the top, so your name, your centre number, your candidate number, all those things. Have a go at answering all the questions, because you've been learning a lot over the past couple of years, and it might be something that's embedded in your head, but at the moment you might think, oh, I'm not quite sure, but I'll just give it a go. It will still be an educated guess. Just give it a go, write something down, and you may get marks for it. The worst thing that might happen is that you don't get marks for it, but you might get marks for it, and so that's worth the risk. And if you need extra space, there's paper at the back of the booklet that you're given with all your questions in. So there's lined paper there. So if you have a compare question that you want to write a lot for, not that you need to, you might want to continue it on one of those back pages, but make sure you write down the number of the question, so then you know it's that question and the examiner can see which question you're extending. All rough work needs to be in the book, as well as, like Claire said, all your calculation working out needs to be within that book, because you might not get the correct answer at the end, but you do get marks for substituting and using the correct equation. So it's important that you write all that in, so then you can get at least a couple of marks. You might not get the final mark, but you might get 1 or 2 marks there. Okay.
So also from the front page instructions, when I showed you a front page earlier, the maximum mark, it'll say the maximum mark on this paper is 70. Okay, now remember you've got exactly 75 minutes for the exam, which is around about 1 minute per mark. There will be a big clock somewhere at the front of the room. There has to be for all exams. So just keep yourself on track. If you find yourself at a question and you've tried to have a guess, but you're not finishing it off, don't spend 15 minutes on one question. Make sure that you move on through. You do not need to get all 70 marks to do really, really well in a paper. So if there's a question that you're genuinely just blank on and you can't remember, move yourself on and complete the rest of the paper. There will be more questions that you know the answers to, and you want to make sure you get to all those questions. You can make a note or put a little star next to it, and if there's time at the end, do go back and try to put a bit more, but make sure that you're moving on through the paper and you're not just stopping at one tricky question earlier on in the paper as well. Also, look for those marks. I know we've both mentioned it a lot, but it's really important. Even doing practice questions, we see that students often write way more than is needed, and that's okay. but you do sometimes have the risk if you say too much, you might have said something correct, but you might contradict yourself and then lose the mark. It's better just to say, though, if it says state one thing, you give the one that you're sure of. Don't give all three that you think might be right. Just give the one. And if it's a 3-mark question, then 1 bullet point is not going to get you the marks. Think about it. 3 marks, they're looking for 3 different things. So those marks are so important, so helpful. Also, the calculator, use it. Okay, we don't have a calculator-free paper in science. And even if you are really good at mental arithmetic, you are in an exam situation, you've got a calculator in front of you, absolutely common sense check it by doing it in your head, but also use the calculator and check that those things match. And if they don't, maybe redo it and double check again. It is easy to make mistakes when you feel under a little bit of pressure. So give yourself that extra opportunity to double check. It doesn't take long. The last part here, it is important to use good, and it says this on the front, to use good English and clear presentation. However, in science, you will not be penalised for misspelling any terms or words that you use in your explanations. The only exception to that would be if it actually changed the meaning of the word, like alkane and alkene are only 1 letter different. And if we can't tell if you mean an A or an E, that could be an example where spelling does matter. But 99% of the time, spelling does not matter as long as the examiner who's reading it can understand the word you meant. If you spell photosynthesis incorrectly, then that's okay if it's clear that you meant to say photosynthesis. So try to explain clearly. It's fine to use short statements and bullet points. We don't need essays in our science papers. So you're able to just identify, it's a 3-mark question, I might just do 3 bullet points that are really clear of what we need in there. The final thing from me here is just to say, make sure that you are totally clear about where you're doing your exams and what time they expect you to be there. That information should all have been provided by your exam centre, which is usually your school or college. Also, if you've got any arrangements in place for extra time or support, double check you know that that's been arranged for you as well with your exam centre, with your school. And finally, this is for most people, their first time sitting exams. Okay, so do try your best. We always say that practice does make progress. Okay, like I said, we don't need to be perfect. You don't need 100%. You just need to do your best and answer everything to the best of your ability. Lots of us do need another attempt at exams in the future, so this is not the only opportunity you will ever have. Just do your absolute best and be kind to yourself over the next few weeks, because it can feel like quite an anxious time, but you've got this with all the tips and all the learning you've been doing coming along to extra sessions as well. So we'll put our top tips up here just to finish up with that summarise what we've gone over this evening. We've got a few minutes left and I'm just having a look at some of the questions that have come in the Q&A, and if you've got any extra, please type them in as well. The equations on the equation sheet are the only equations that will be used in the exam. Yes, I want to all wish you good luck, and I'm just going to look and see if we've got any more Q&A questions. Thank you, everyone. Well, just want to give you a reminder, over at the side there beside me, we have got the slides from tonight for you to download. So if you click on those, it'll let you download a PDF copy of those. The revision planner, which is a nice section of some of our recommended links and useful information. It's got the dates of the exams and the topics of each exam and some links in there. Also, the attendance certificate. You came along tonight and made the effort to do that extra bit of revision, so please do download that one for yourselves as well. And if you don't already have them, there's copies of the periodic table and the physics equation sheet that you can download as well. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. And from all of us, we wish you really good luck in your final exams, and just keep calm and follow the tips, and you're going to do really, really well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Hope you found it useful. Good luck.